Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I am your host, Evie Hepworth, and I want to start off by saying thanks for being here. I kick every single episode off by saying that I am so aware of how large and ginormous this world is and all of the million different conversations that are breathtaking conversations that you could be listening to. And so I want to let you know it means so much that you're here, and it is my greatest prayer that these conversations lead you into a deeper dialogue with Jesus. I'm super excited about this week's guest with my friend Hannah Hughes. Hannah is a mother, a truth teller, and a woman who has walked through the valleys of mental health with just really beautiful honesty and hope. This conversation is tender, but it is weighty. So I do want to let you know that if there are precious little ears around, maybe this is one to put in your headphones. We touch on topics like miscarriage, depression, suicide, just different hard challenges that have woven themselves into Hannah's story. Hannah just shares with just a really beautiful raw heart that just the aches of motherhood and the aches of life. And like we talk about what healing looks like when it's slow and what motherhood looks like when joy and sorrow kind of share that same breath. And what does it mean to keep showing up even when it feels like we're kind of falling apart? And so this episode is for the mom who cries in the bathroom and wonders if she's the only one. It's for the woman who is just tired of pretending that things are okay. And it's for anyone who's ever whispered, like, I don't know how to hold all of this pain and still be who I'm supposed to be. And so, oh man, without further ado, here's my conversation with my friend, Hannah Hughes. I feel so grateful to have you in this space. And I would love to hear, for people who don't know who you are, will you share a little bit about how you spend your days and what got you to where you are today?
Yeah. Okay. Oh man, I feel very jumbled whenever people ask me this question. I'm like, oh, where do I begin? I'm
like,
a mom.
do you have 5 hours? Because
yeah, I'm like, exactly. I'm like, how do I make this really easy for you to understand? Like, let's break this down as if I were explaining it to a 5-year-old. Not
also, it's so funny because you're like, what builds you as a human is trauma. So you're like, so right off the gate, we're 18 seconds in, and should I just like tell you all the traumatic moments of my life, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how honest do you want me to be? Should we just go there? Because I'm all for that. I'm actually someone like, I hate small talk. I feel very awkward about that. I would rather just like get right into it. So we might as well just go there.
We want the nitty gritty, not PG. We want the honest, what God's rescued you from. And so liberate us by telling your testimony.
Okay, let's do it. I'll start there. And that kind of gets us to where we are today. I grew up in the church. I actually grew up in the Bible Belt, Texas belt buckle of the Bible Belt, as they say. And I grew up going to church. My parents are Christians. They're wonderful people. They always have been. And I have been in church always. And I'm thankful for that. And I also went to private Christian school all the way through. And for a while, my church and school were the same thing. So I was very much in the bubble. And I just, grew up knowing about God. I knew so much about God. I could quote scripture. I had Bible class every day, chapel on Wednesdays, going to church, serving. It was just so normal to me. It was like ingrained. And I got into middle school and started experiencing some things for the first time that kind of like shook my perspective of what this Christian life was supposed to be. I thought it was like, oh, I'm a Christian. That means life is amazing and beautiful and perfect.
Totally.
And easy. Like, this is great. Like, I have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And so I started experiencing some things like I went through some bullying at school about my weight and my skin and things like that. And for the first time, I realized, whoa, like people are looking at me and they have opinions. Yeah, they do. And the thing that really was a bummer is this was people from my church.
Right.
And so I started having this conflict in my heart, like, God, I believe in you. Like, I believe you're real, but why are Christians terrible? Because we're supposed to be known by our love, right? But these people are actually the worst. Right. And so I like progress through junior high and into high school. I start really struggling with mental health. And there was a lot going on in that season. I was experiencing bullying. I had developed an eating disorder at the time, was cutting, very anxious, very depressed, like going through a lot. And at the same time, I was 13. My parents decided to adopt my little sister from Ethiopia, who was 4. So now my whole life, which was normal with me and my brother, who is 2 years younger than I am, we've always been very close. We now have this little girl who speaks no English, has never been in America, is dealing with her own stuff. And I all of a sudden feel like no one cares about what I'm going through. And at the same time, feeling like, well, I should suck it up. Like I should be fine.
Sure.
I trust Jesus. I need to choose joy. It's great. Like we'll put on a happy face. No one wants to deal with this. No one wants to hear about my stuff. And so that's kind of the pattern that I'm living of just like, okay, I'm struggling, but I should probably just get over this. Like it's probably
Sure.
not that bad. Like I just need to trust Jesus. That's what
Yeah.
good Christians do. Good Christians don't struggle with this, right? And so as I get a little older, things got really, really bad. And by the time I was 15, I had decided that I was going to commit suicide because I was like, you know what? I just can't do this. If people knew what I was really going through and the things that I was struggling with, I mean, they would be so disappointed. My parents would think I'm a failure. Like I'm trying to perform and be this perfect daughter and make straight A's and do all the right things and be a good Christian. And I am not hitting any of the marks.
Totally.
So everyone must be just really disappointed in me. And I feel like my best and only option at this point is just to quit. Spare people the pain of having to deal with my stuff. Like I genuinely thought it would be better for the people that I loved if I just was removed from the equation. And so I come home this specific night, just ready. I had my plan in place, was ready to go. And I was upstairs in my room at the time when I was 15 years old, planning to end my life. And the same night is when my mom had found out from a friend's mom how bad things had gotten for me. And so my mom was downstairs in the room that was right under mine, just interceding and praying for me. And
what a mom.
I know, right? I'm like, wow, my mom was really the real deal. But all I remember in that night was I just was crying. I was about to do it. And I don't remember anything else. I think I must have fallen asleep because I woke up the next morning and it was a Sunday. So my parents took me to church. And so
wow.
All of a sudden everything comes out and I am so frustrated and disappointed. I feel betrayed. I'm like, I was just trying to make things easier for everybody. And here we are. But my parents found out about what I was going through and their response was just like, we want to help you. Like we had no idea. Like, what can we do? We love you. And I was shocked. For the first time in my life, I was like, whoa, someone could see my brokenness and my mess and my disgusting failures and just be like, hey, I love you. I want to help you. I did not expect that. And obviously at the time, like there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health in the church world. It was very taboo.
Right.
And so it just started me on this long journey of like, okay, what I thought was going to be the salvation moment of God changing my life and fixing all my problems actually began this very, very long, intense, hard, uphill battle journey of healing in my life. But what was different was for the first time I had hope and I understood like, okay, I can be broken and loved at the same time. And I didn't understand that before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I really thought like that moment, that pivotal moment with Jesus and my faith, making my faith real, there was a lot of other things going on at that time where I had just decided, like, Lord, I just want to be real with you. I want this at whatever cost. And what I thought would be, this easy journey obviously was not. And I thought like, I even wrote a book about that story. I called it Waking Up, like that moment where I had planned to end my life. I thought it was the end of my story. I woke up and it was this beautiful testimony now. It wasn't the end of my story. Sure. It was the beautiful beginning of a testimony. Yeah. And I was like, this is life. This is living in purpose. Right?
Yeah, totally.
But after that, I experienced sexual abuse multiple times. And then fast forward a few years into my recent life, I went through 3 miscarriages and I went through these moments where I thought, I thought I'd never be back on antidepressants. I thought I would never be struggling with mental health again. I thought motherhood would be this natural, easy thing, right? And like, I find myself here in this season of life, obviously skipping ahead quite a bit, but I have just realized that this purpose thing doesn't mean getting to a point where I'm finally not struggling anymore.
Right.
It's like, how do we actually navigate the broken and hard of life, knowing that we're loved at the same time?
Yeah.
And so that's what I do a lot of my days is spend my days, I'm a mom.
Yeah.
I have a podcast, so I love having these conversations about like things women wish were talked about in the church world more. A lot of it is mental health. A lot of it is the stuff that I felt like, oh, good Christians don't struggle with this.
Yeah.
But actually we do. And so
Yeah.
how do we reconcile the brokenness of our humanity with the goodness of God? And what does it look like to live it out in a way that is our purpose, right? And so, so that's my day-to-day life. And then I also work part-time at the mall, which is really interesting. But
I love that. Honestly, I love that about you. That might be my favorite thing about you is that you do what you need to do for your family. And also you do what you need to do because you're like, you know what, if I'm going to be here, then I'm going to find purpose in it. And I know that that zip code and that space is different because you're there. But I just, to me, it's such a marker of, I mean, to me, that's so beautiful. I just want you to know that. So my question is, what would you say to somebody who's like, okay, same as Hannah, like I've read all the messages. I know all the trendy pastors that are, I know what to do. I know which conferences to buy tickets to. I know like whatever, check. But the inside, like the marrow of my spirit is struggling and I'm not believing that he can actually lift this or that I can live another day while carrying this. What would you say to that person?
Oh my gosh. So many things come to mind, but I think about myself in the early years of my faith. And I've had this picture of what I was so convinced a good Christian looked like.
Yeah. Do you, interrupting you, do you cringe at your old self?
Yes, so much.
I'm
like I want to hug her and I want to take her shopping for clothes that look like I think
like theology. You're like, honey. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The things that I thought were required of us to be good.
Totally.
And now I've come to this place in my life where I'm like, whoa, it's actually not about my goodness at all. And it's the most freeing thing, but it's hard also. You know, people talk about those two kinds of pains where there's a pain of just staying in the same spot because it's comfortable and you never grow, you never experience freedom. And then there's the pain of actually breaking out of that place. And it's so uncomfortable and scary and raw and vulnerable. But it's like, well, it's going to be uncomfortable either way. So which one are we going to choose?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it just got to a point where I was like, this is not working. I'm an Enneagram 3, if that means anything to you people. I'm an achiever gal to a T. Like I want to perform. I want to be good. I want to be productive. I want to be right. You know, like I want to know the right things, say the right things, know what the Bible says, all of that, tick all the boxes. And I wore myself into the ground trying to be good, striving, performing. And I just realized, what is this all for? Like, I remember I had a therapist who told me once, like, it's like you're on a treadmill that's no longer working and you're just like manually getting it to spin.
Yeah.
And you are wearing yourself out and you're going nowhere. Like, what is the outcome you even want here? Because the thing that you're working so hard for has already been done. Like, God loves you.
Yeah.
You're already loved. You're already good. And it's not because of anything you could ever do, you know? And so that's the first thing I think I would say to my younger self or anyone who's feeling that way, where it's like, I feel like on paper, I'm doing all the right things. So why is it so hard to like, why do I feel stuck? Why do I feel tired? Why do I feel so exhausted in my faith? It's like, well, what are you working for?
Yes.
Why? What are you working so hard to prove? There's nothing to prove. And it took me so long, like probably 30 years. And I'm 30.
I'm still working that out. I am still over here trying not to prove anything.
Exactly. It's hard.
It is.
Like it's ingrained in us. Like we want to be good. Yes. And I think it's with good intentions, but
totally.
Yeah, I just feel like I had to get to a point where I had that revelation of, you know, there's nothing. I was even praying the other day. I felt like such a failure in motherhood specifically. Like my son's going through a lot and I'm going through a lot, like mental health struggles. And I just feel like I can't win. I'm in the season where I'm like, one step forward, 10 steps back, can hardly get above the water before the next wave hits. And I was just journaling and I was like, God, I am so sorry. I don't have anything good to offer you. And I just felt him say, like, it's not about what you can offer me. It's about bringing what you do have as an offering. And I know you and I talked about that in the episode where you were just saying, like, bring what you have. And I just feel like that was a moment for me where I was like, what? Like, does that, can I do that? Like, you would accept this? Like, I literally have nothing good.
Yeah.
And he's like, just come. It's an offering, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a pretty thing that you've cultivated and curated and like worked out on your own to bring to me. It's like, just bring the mess.
100% bring the mess. I specialize in that.
Same.
I feel like that is such a shift in the heart of faith when you all of a sudden, when you do have that, you know, kind of revelation. And the hard part is remembering and carrying that revelation into new seasons, because I've had that revelation, you know, last month. But then yesterday when I'm struggling, I'm like, oh, shoot, like I forgot how. Like there's such a muscle memory that's kind of associated with learning how to like actually be like, whew, here's the ugly, you know? Yep. And have been reflecting in the Gospels when Jesus always over and over in all 4 Gospels, he says to Bartimaeus, what do you want? And it's the question, I'm like, why does he not ask what you need? Why does he ask what you want? And then also every single person, he responds and says, I want to see. And I've always wondered, like, how do I get my wants to be the same of God's wants? Because in that moment, Bartimaeus could have said, oh, I want world peace. Oh, I want world hunger. Like, because when I read that, I'm like, that was kind of selfish. Like, he could have asked for anything with, you know, the maker of the world. And he asked for sight. And I've been really challenged where God in the morning, I feel like he's just like, Elizabeth, like, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, it's not selfish to come to him with what you want. Am I going to allow that, if I get it or not, to directly impact whether or not I feel loved? No, but I do feel like it's coming back to that honesty of being like, I'm going to be honest with what I want, you know? And so that's kind of a little rabbit trail. But one question I want to ask you while you were sharing is, where do you think this dialogue and this coat of shame came on, like in the church with medication? Like, why everyone I talk to, some of my absolute dearest friends will look me in the eyes and be like, I feel like an absolute loser. And I'm like, you wouldn't tell my son, who is alive because of his medication, that he's a loser because he's taking medication. Or when my mom had leukemia, if she denied the, you know, chemo, you wouldn't tell her that her faith, that she just needs quiet time and that she's just dwelling on the wrong things. Like, and so where do you think the shame came from specifically? Because here's the other thing. My friends that are not walking with Jesus, there's no shame. They're like, yeah, Zoloft has been and I'm like, so why does the church, where does that come from with medication?
Oh man, I have thought about this so much because I just don't understand. And I feel the same way. I'm like, would you tell a diabetic, like, you probably just need to pray more, get off that insulin,
your
you know?
faith sucks. Yeah, you wouldn't say that. Like,
never. And so kind of like I mentioned in my story, like there was not a conversation about mental illness. And I remember and I have so much grace for my dad because he just didn't know. But there was one time when I was going through depression, I was in counseling, and it was before I was medicated, and I was just having a really tough time. And my dad just said, you've got to stop being so negative. And I was like, do you think I'm choosing this?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that I just want to be negative all the time? Sure. No. Like, and I think for a long time, people just didn't understand that there was another layer to this aspect of holistic health. And, you know, I think that there's a lot more people, maybe not even more people understanding, but more people willing to talk about the fact that we are also triune beings of spirit, soul, and body. And this idea that full person health has to be looked at from the lens of all three sometimes, because there are things that happen in our body that are affected by our emotional and our mental health. Right. Because I grew up in a church world where it was like, well, why do you believe that? Oh, because the Bible says so. Yeah. Like, we don't ask questions about it. Right. That's just what the word of God says. Right. And I think actually it's a really healthy thing to ask questions. And I know you're reading 40 Days of Decrease right now too, but I was reading the other day where she was talking about how a healthy faith that is actually formed by asking questions.
Yes.
Like that actually does something to strengthen us, is
Yes.
being willing to ask the why. And like,
Yes.
maybe if we don't even get the answer, we get closer to Jesus in the process. And that's the whole point.
Come on, preacher. It's so good. I talk a lot about how hopelessness does wear the mask of shame. Like shame has entered the building when we are hopeless, right? And that is often in mental health challenges. It's very easy to be bankrupt of hope because it is an overwhelming, like, you can't see it. You're like, why can't I just have like a diagnosable like this, in the sense of we can go check your level. It's very nuanced, right? And it's very misunderstood. So anyway, all that to say, shame, there's a lot of space for shame to come in and try and narrate our stories. And so it's hard to be like, where's the hope in this? I'm so low. I'm so grief. Sometimes if we don't look at it for what it is, we'll disguise that as shame and hopelessness, and we'll carry the weight of it as if it's not holy, even though it is a companion to intimacy with the Lord. And so I want to trail off into another thought of, we've both had pregnancy loss. That is a huge part of my story. And when you lose a baby and again, shame, but the hopelessness, it's like, whoa, there's like a vein of betrayal here. And I'm struggling with reconciling that with like the kindness of God, And so a lot of my friends that I sit across that are in the middle of a miscarriage story, they're like, I just don't understand. And so what would you say, how do people differentiate like loss and grief in response to something tragic that happened in their story too? Because a lot of times that trails them into a deep depression, right? Because they're just like, it's very, very hard to navigate that kind of tragedy. I think this is a huge fork in the road with the narrow way, right? Is how do we hold suffering? But what would you say to the person that is like really, really struggling with their thoughts and their condition of their heart, and even maybe, their experience with Jesus in response to something like pregnancy loss?
Oh gosh, it just, oh man, I remember when I went through my first miscarriage and I was so angry and devastated, and I did not understand, because I had a healthy pregnancy with my son. And I mean, I had complications with my son's pregnancy, but going into a second pregnancy after having one child, it's the last thing on your mind that you could have a miscarriage or that anything could go wrong. And like even pregnancy at all. I mean, I grew up and was like, yeah, I'll be a mom someday. Like you never think that there's going to be anything hard about something like becoming a mom, right? And then you get there and you're like, what is this about? Like, this makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And I was so just frustrated by that. It took me a really, really long time to come to terms with what had happened, I think. Because for me, my first miscarriage, we heard the heartbeat. I went alone to my first appointment because I was like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be normal. Like, it's just going in to get checked, right? Yeah. But my doctor was like, hey, you're measuring small. Come back. We'll check again. So I came back, and a week or two later, no heartbeat, but I hadn't miscarried yet. And so the hardest thing for me about that experience was that for 2 weeks, I still was holding on to this grief for this thing that I couldn't fully process because I knew it had happened, but it hadn't happened yet. Does that make sense? And so I'm just, for lack of better words, like carrying around this grief, waiting for it to pass. And I felt so stuck in the in-between that I was like, God, what is this? Like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, I've never experienced anything like this. Are you still good? Are you still here? Like, how could you let this happen?
Yeah.
And it took me probably a good year to get to a point where I could even open up and start processing it, because what happened was a lot of shame started to sink in. You know, I have a second miscarriage, I have a third miscarriage, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, am I not a good mom? Maybe God doesn't want me to have more kids. Maybe I don't deserve this. Like, what is going on? Like, all of these things start coming into your mind. And it's like, when I think of hopelessness, particularly, it feels like being out in the middle of the ocean, just flailing about, and you can't touch the ground. And you're just like, someone help me. Like, I can hardly keep my head above water. And it's so scary. I just want to grab onto anything.
Yes.
Even if it's not something that's particularly helpful or
Right.
safe. Like, I just want something to hold on to.
Yes.
And so I think when it comes to grief, at least for me, that's kind of what it was. I was like, I just want to grab onto anything that will help me make sense of this.
Yeah.
And so
It's
for a
placebo.
while,
Yeah, it's a placebo for comfort, right?
yeah, that's exactly what it is. And so for a long time, I was just reaching onto that. And it really stunted my healing journey because I wasn't willing to open up about it with the Lord. I wasn't willing to cling to his goodness in that moment because it was impossible for me to see. I was like, there's nothing, there's like one string here to hold on to, and that doesn't really feel like it'll do much good. So I'm just going to hold on to this idea that maybe maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I just don't deserve, maybe there's something wrong with me. Like, that seemed more tangible in that moment. But I mean, as I continued going through this healing process, I started bringing those questions to the Lord. And I remember it was one of the hardest times in my faith because I honestly was like, is it worth it to keep wrestling through this? I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that I did because I remember this one particular day. It was actually the day that we had confirmed our third miscarriage. And I was just praying and processing with the Lord. And I felt like, okay, I never wanted this to be part of my story. I feel like I have enough testimonies. I didn't really want this. But here we are. And I can either choose to let it be the thing that just really stamps out my faith. And I just get quiet and I just give up on this whole thing of like letting God into the story and all of that stuff, that I had believed. Or what does this say about God? Like, what does my pain actually tell me about my God? Like, how can I reconnect somehow the thread of God's goodness through my grief and through my pain? And the conclusion that I came to is, we may never have the answers for all of our whys of the brokenness and pain of this world, besides the fact that it is just a broken and sin-filled world. But what if we have this opportunity as believers in our grief and in our suffering to experience healing and comfort in a way that actually is what shows the world we have a healer? Like, am I willing to engage in that narrative?
Yeah.
Even though it's uncomfortable and doesn't feel as tangible as clinging to whatever I can, what other reasoning.
Actually congruent with what I'm feeling, but I'm choosing my cerebral mind to believe that. That's the hard part, right? Not dictating what I believe based off what's happening in my heart,
Yes.
Oh, and there's something about tragedy and hopelessness where when you're sitting at rock bottom of like, I actually don't want this life, of learning what it's like to actually behold Jesus for who he is versus what your life looks like, and just like to be like, I'm going to behold you because of you gave me life. You are not my vending machine. You are my royal king. And so like being able to have that heart of like, I'm going to love you because you've given me life versus what now life has been taken from me. My mentor who, you're doing 40 days of decrease. She, did a teaching once or in one of our meetings where she was talking about Simon. And I think I've shared this on some episode, but she's talking about Simon and how Jesus is walking the road. I actually have a picture of it on my desk, where somebody and basically this idea, and it's in Luke, let's see, chapter 22, where Jesus is carrying the cross. He's getting ready to go to his death. And then the Romans look at this random guy in the crowd. His name is Simon. And they say, carry the cross. And it's this whole idea of the first person that actually carried the cross of Jesus, the first person to walk in the actual blood of Jesus, because he's got blood running from his brow, from the thorns. Like the first person actually walking in the blood didn't ask to be there. He just happened to be in the crowd for Passover, and then somebody grabbed him. And so he's carrying, and what's crazy is that like, as he's carrying the cross heavy, he's following Jesus and he's looking up, and it's like, he didn't even get the gift of being able to see his eyes, but he knew who is this guy? I'm carrying this guy's cross. Like what? And so there's something about just being like, I'm going to carry this cross, and I didn't ask for it, but I'm going to carry it. There's something about that cost, right? Of just being like, yeah, I'm going to take the tragedy and sorrow that comes with me because I have the gift of the Spirit to be able to hold it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else that I wanted to ask you was, in kind of like a peak moment, I'm thinking of moments I've had in mental health and just all the different hats that, and I know you're a 3, so you wear way more hats than I do. I'm a 4-wing 3, so I have like sprinkles of that. But in motherhood specifically, when you are like, okay, your story, so pregnancy, especially having another baby after those losses, for people that don't know her family, she did have a daughter later. And so, and that guilt where you're like, I've prayed for this, I've wanted it, I had 3 losses, but then now I'm sitting in this answered prayer and feeling so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I don't feel like people talk about it a lot because they're like, oh my gosh, this miracle happened. And so now I just have to be literally fueled by so much joy every second, and I'm not allowed to struggle. So what would you say to the person that's like, I'm sitting in an answered prayer, God has redeemed parts of my story, and yet I'm still anxious?
Oh man. I had, okay. So yes, after my 3 miscarriages, I got pregnant with our daughter. It was miracle.
Yeah.
And so here she comes, and I'm pregnant with her. And all of a sudden, like midway through my pregnancy with her, I start having all these complications. She thankfully was fine, but everything for me, like I had these liver issues and just random stuff going on. I was like, are you kidding me? And I remember after one of my appointments where we had another diagnosis for something in pregnancy, I was like, God, this was supposed to be the redemption story. What is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, it is. This is the redemption story. And it kind of like circled me back to what I used to think was true about Christian life, is like, this is the redemption story. A believer comes to Jesus, and now we are free of our pain and our sin and our struggles. No, the redemption story is we have pain and sin and struggles and a Savior who walks with us in it. That is the redemption story. And I had to shift that in my mindset because, even after that moment, I mean, my daughter was born early. My miracle baby was in the NICU. We had tons of complications. I was terrified. Yeah. And I'm like, Lord, this is the redemption story. This looks nothing like what I wanted, what I hoped it would be, what I thought it would be. And I don't know. I feel like when you get to a point in your relationship with Jesus where you can just be really, really raw and honest and vulnerable, you realize that all of life is kind of this middle ground of holding the tension between, this is my beautiful redemption story. And it includes pain and grief and suffering and hard, messy stuff.
Yeah.
And I used to think that being a Christian meant we go from the grief, suffering, hard stuff to the redemption story of living with Christ.
Yeah.
But now I've realized it's actually learning to carry both.
Yeah. It's very radical to decide to remain tethered to God in the midst of a lot of questions and a lot of hurt. Like, it's radical, especially in today's culture, right? Like when it's just a lot easier to cope and medicate with, whatever, binge Netflix or whatever, all these other comforts, right? And it does take a level of spiritual maturity to know how to be comforted by him and his word. Like, while you were talking, I was thinking, gosh, like if somebody came to me and was like, I'm feeling so anxious in the middle of motherhood, or like this dream that I've ached for, and now I'm sitting in it, but I'm struggling with the guilt of like, why am I struggling in my mind? And what came to mind, was when Paul in Second Corinthians is like, and when you said look somewhere else, that also confirmed I feel like I'm supposed to read this. So whoever's listening, I want you to look 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 18, as we look not to the things that are seen but to the things that are unseen, for the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. And I know I'm reading my husband's Bible, which is not my version, but the version of mine is like, we fix our eyes on the things that our human eyes cannot see. And that's the challenge, right? In seasons of like, God, I can't see you. Like you are very much unseeable to my fleshly eyes. And so what does it look like to fix my eyes on the unseen? What does it look like to carry this burden that you've gifted me with? And that now I get to like, and how do I allow my eyes to see this tragedy as a gift? Okay, because you're bringing actual false theology to the surface that now I can purge. I've thought you were the God that only gave me goodness, but I'm realizing you are the God who allows your goodness to override whatever I'm carrying. Like there's just different purging. It's a kindness of God that will, be this crucible to expose what we actually believe about him. And then we get to, and the other thing, how you were like, God, instead of asking God why, ask like, and my thought is like, why don't we ask him who he is in this? Like there are so many facets of who Jesus is that we deny ourselves to walk with because we're so afraid. Like, but I can't tell you the different names of God and the way he's walked with me in different moments of like, oh my gosh, like you are revealing yourself as healer in this moment in a way I've never experienced. Or like, I never knew what it meant when you said that you're a shepherd or that you're a friend or that you're, and so it's just, it's that beholding that he's able to speak to you in a different name that like it changes your faith. And then that's why it's like the blood of the lamb and the testimony, because then you take that testimony and you hand it to someone else that's in that season and you're like, hey, and that gives hope. And then, you got to get your hopeless goggles off and actually see the world and truth. And okay. Anyway, sorry. Soapbox done. Okay.
No, I love that because I think we have to ask ourselves, what do we want more? Do we want answers or do we want Jesus?
Yeah.
And I think it just comes back to that. Like it is costly.
Yeah.
But it is worth it.
Today, he is the answer.
Yes.
And so the kindness of him is that he gives you both because he is the answer to like, which I realize people hearing that there could be a sigh and someone who's in the pit of a hard moment. It's like, well, how is Jesus the answer to this? But he is. And so being able to reclaim that truth in a really, really painful season is very, very hard truth. But like, it's just wild. It's radical. Okay. So my last question for you would be, gosh, my mind is, I want to ask you a million things because I know people listening to this are going to be like, Hannah is like literally just preaching it down. But for somebody who struggles with mental health and they're occupying the role of mother, what does it look like to take care of your body, soul, and mind while you're also responsible for other body, souls, and mind? Like, how have you been able to hold this, and what has been beneficial for you that maybe some listeners could maybe apply to their life?
Oh man, if there is a mom who is struggling with mental health, I wish that I could just give you a hug and sit with you in silence and buy you coffee. It is so hard. I was even just having a hard day earlier this week, and I was just like, oh, I wish that more moms talked about this because I feel that sense of shame sometimes when I talk about how I love my kids. I recognize the gift that they are. Yeah. But sometimes I don't love motherhood. It's hard and it stretches me. And it kind of like you said, that sanctification process, bringing stuff out of me that I don't like looking at sometimes. And it is so hard when you add to that mental health struggles. And I wish I had a really good answer for that. But I think something that I am currently learning is to be willing to ask for help when you need it. And I know that sounds like the simplest, like basic thing, but moms struggle to, we feel this pressure and we see these Instagram moms who are doing it all. They're homeschooling their kids and they're baking bread and they're doing their workout and they're waking up early. And I'm like, I can't even get up before my kids. My kid wakes me up 20 minutes before we have to get out of the house. And I'm lucky if I like have a smoothie for breakfast. Does that mean I'm a bad mom? Does it mean that I'm doing something wrong? And like, it's so easy for those lies to slip in.
Yeah.
And so especially again, with the added piece of mental health, I have to ask for help or asking a friend to meet for a play date or asking a friend to like take your kids for a while. Like I used to be scared to ask for help with childcare and things like that if I needed a break. And I'm learning that people want to help you. I actually saw a post earlier this week, like everyone wants to be part of a village, but not a lot of people want to be a villager. And what does that look like? It means engaging in the community of give and take and like kind of the Acts 2 church of having everything in common. Like, what does it look like actually to operate as a body? And I think when it comes specifically in mental health, we need that more than ever.
Yes.
We can't do it without people. Like we can't be healthy. If one part of the body is unhealthy, like it affects everybody. And I think we think when we struggle with mental health, I need to turn inward and I need to deal with this on my own and not let people see that I'm struggling. But actually one of the most healing things we can do is engage in community. You know, as we're able to in those moments, because a lot of healing unexpectedly comes that way, especially for moms.
Yes, 100%. I was having a moment this week earlier. I was feeling so insecure. It was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I am just suffocating insecurity. And I pick up my kids from school and I was like, hey guys, mommy really needs to spend some time with Jesus because I think I'm looking at myself a little bit more than him. And so I come into the office and I'm like actually like on my face in our office playing worship music. And the kids are outside and they come in and they were like, mommy, did Jesus give you answers yet? And I'm like, just spending time with him, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, would you pray for mommy? And so all four of my kids, like they're all around me. They're like, put hands on him. They're like, you know, help mommy feel better, all this. But I was like, this is such a moment of like, and this, I mean, that's a common experience in our household of like, hey, I want to model my need for Jesus. Like I want to model like, hey, your prayers are just as valuable as, you know, the pastor. Like, will you come into this moment of, you know, need with me? And it's like, oh, and then it was so funny because yesterday, actually, my oldest was like, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Would you pray for me? And I was like, I would love to, you know? And so it's just this like moment where you're like, oh, they're learning how to carry these, different feelings. Right. And I'm learning how to model that with them. We're both learning how to be comforted by God and by letting people in. So anyway, oh my gosh, Hannah, I just feel like so many people are going to listen to us and just be just grateful for your honesty. I'm so thankful for the way that you are willing to talk about things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And so thank you for your courage. Like seriously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for making space for these conversations.
I am so grateful for people that share their story with just such honesty and openness, because what a gift, just the power of a testimony and how it just breathes courage into other people listening. And so I hope that that's what Hannah's story today did for you. And man, I'm so grateful for this voice, and I'm so grateful for this woman that just shared the way she did. So like always, if you have a second and could rate this episode on whatever platform you're listening to, it does mean the world. And we only have a handful, 1 or 2 podcast episodes left for this summer. And I'm so excited to just enjoy the rest of the summer with my precious family. And so as we wrap up season 3, I hope that wherever you find yourself today, that you are just really leaning back into the fullness of what God has for you in this season and in this day specifically. All right. We'll see you next week on the Let Me Ask You This podcast.